What are you supposed to say if you get stopped at an immigration checkpoint? What happens if they come to your door? Are you allowed to record? Because we've seen some videos where you've got officers who are knocking phones out of hands or telling them to not record. Like, are you allowed to? Are you not allowed to?
Good evening. It is evening in the city of Detroit tonight, and I am Todd Russell Perkins, and I am Perkins for the people, and we are Perkins for the people. And I am anxious to get you information. I'm anxious to get you education. I'm anxious to tell you what to do in these troubled times that we're in. We have people who are dying in our streets. We have citizens who are dying in our streets. We have people who are scared about what's going on in our country. And a lot of it has to do with our federal ICE agents. These individuals who are going around cities with faces covered and masks, and it doesn't seem, and here's my um, initial look at what is transpiring. They don't have the training that law enforcement officers have. And at the very least, they haven't been applying the training if they do have it. And so tonight, we have been getting a lot of calls. We've been getting a lot of questions, and we're taking many of those questions and presenting them to you tonight. And we're going to answer some of those questions and hopefully leave you with education and knowledge and a plan to deal with an interaction with ICE, not only for yourself, but for your family and friends. We want everyone to be safe. We want everyone, when they go out of their home, to be able to make it back to their home safely and be able to enjoy life. And, it's hard to enjoy life being scared. It's hard to enjoy life feeling that there's a Gestapo running rampant through our country. And let's get started tonight. I want to introduce you to our producer, one of our producers, but our main producer, Connie Smith, who you talk about ride or die. This is, we're up in the wee hours of the night, and there's many things that she could be doing, but she's here because she finds it's important, and she wants, as a group, we want to get this information to you. So, Connie, hey, how are you?
I'm good. I'm good. Thanks for letting me join in tonight.
Oh
You know,
no.
I can't help but doom scroll on my phone, and I don't know if watching all of these videos with these these ICE officer interactions with citizens is helping or hurting, but I keep reposting them because I keep seeing the same thing over and over again. You've got US citizens who are saying and doing all of the right things, so they think, but they're still having these very brutal interactions with these so-called officers. We are feeling ICE creeping into our communities. We've had a lot of protests lately. And so I feel like it's our job to, let the audience know like what they can do to protect themselves. So, Todd, I have some questions about what can our citizens do to protect themselves if they are approached by ICE officers? What are the phrases? What should they be doing? Like, let's just say if somebody comes to their door, do these officers have to have a warrant?
Well, they do have to have a warrant to come in your home. There has to be some basis upon entering the privacy and the sanctity of someone's home. There are various different types of search warrants, but it's a search warrant that allows people inside of someone's home. There's also a warrant if there's a reasonable and credible belief that an individual who is a wanted individual is in that home. A warrant for that individual, an arrest warrant, allows to enter that home to search only for that person. Now, does that typically limit them when they go in a practical sense? No, they typically, once they're in, they're in, but that's not what they're supposed to do. But when someone knocks at your door, you don't have to open your door unless the officer declares that they have a warrant. If they have a warrant, they also have the ability to knock. They've knocked, they've announced themselves, and if the door is not open, they have the right based upon that search warrant, an order signed by a judge to come into that home and break that door.
Now, what's the difference between a warrant and maybe paperwork from Border Patrol, essentially? Just saying, hey, we have federal permission to come to your home.
Well, they still need a warrant. They still need a warrant to come in. I mean, they can come to your home, and they can, if you open the door, that's essentially letting them in. But if you keep them at bay, if they have paperwork and if it's not a warrant, you do not have to open your door or let them into your home.
Are there any exact words that, homeowners, residents should use to assert their rights without escalating the situation?
Well, first you want to stay calm. I know people are nervous. I know people are scared. I believe in some of the tactics that have been employed are to make people afraid sometimes. But you stay calm. Ask ask them what their purpose is. You have an ability to question them. And first, if they're coming knocking at your home, ask them, do they have a warrant?
Now, what if you're stopped on the street? If they're stopped, I saw this one video where this woman was literally right outside of her house and she had just started walking her dog. And they're like, we need to see your ID. She's like, I'm a US citizen. This is my home. I live here. We need to see your ID. And they wouldn't let her leave to necessarily go back to her home. But if she didn't stand her ground, they were going to arrest her right then and there.
And
Now,
and, and I didn't see that video. Did she show her identification?
she did not have her identification on her.
Okay.
So people in the comments of the video were saying in other countries, if you're over the age of 14, by law, you have to have your ID on you. But that's not the case here in the United States of America.
No, it's not. But here's the irony, and here's the thing that happens. And um, you have these checkpoints within 100 miles of borders, and that you have to be mindful of. And technically, in the city of Detroit, we've got a border less than, from my office, less than a quarter mile. I mean, it's right outside my window. You have Canada, so that technically is a border. Sometimes we don't see that, and I don't think that that's what our president was describing when he talked about shithole countries years ago. But at the same time, it's still a border which allows for those areas of immigration checkpoints. So getting back to that point, and there was a woman in Chicago, I believe in the Chicago area, who was pulled out of her car, wouldn't give her identification, and she was held and detained. I mean, this is an American white woman and was taken into custody and detained and released because they recognized she was a citizen. Now, the reality is, she possibly has some rights as it relates to being able to perhaps sue the federal government, but that didn't stop them at that time from taking her into custody. When you didn't produce the identification, they're going to claim that there's some reasonable suspicion, and that's the standard. They're going to say some reasonable suspicion to investigate this individual upon which ID should be presented. And that's their doorway into this wholesale violation of people's rights. Because here's what happens. I get stopped on the street. I say, I don't want to produce my identification. Most law enforcement officers, if they don't have some reasonable suspicion, they're not going to fabricate one. What I'm hearing, and these are not my personal experiences, thank goodness, but what I am hearing from people who have lived this truth and this hard, cold truth is they'll stop, and those people who are against what's going on will rebuff them and not produce their identification, and they'll be detained. And they're detained until they produce identification. And when you're detained, then they're going to search your person. Once they search your person, and they arrest you or they don't call it an arrest, they call it a detention. Once they detain you, and then they see your identification and see that you're a citizen and have you're properly documented. It's a shame that I'm even saying that. But those individuals are then released. Does that
And where are
person
they
have,
ta where are they taking you when they are detaining people? Are they taking you to the local police department? Like, where are you going? And how do your people find
it
you?
depends on the city. They are actually building facilities as we speak. I mean, this is, oftentimes when we say a movement, it means something that's progressive. It means something that's altruistic. It means something that is essentially good when we talk about movements. But this is another kind of movement, and it is a movement of fear. It is a movement of I don't think I can use this word enough. Gestapo tactics,
Right.
and they are building facilities as we speak. There's several. Now that I don't do immigration law, but I have a lot of clients who have immigration concerns, and I work with a lot of immigration lawyers, so I have a basic knowledge of the law. Wouldn't call myself an expert in that, but now I have had to, in the past. Now I've had to do a lot more research. I have to be a lot more knowledgeable, even though I still bring in immigration attorneys on a lot of my cases. But what it's educated me on is how many facilities that they have and how many that they intend to build, not only just in this state, but every state.
Well, right, especially if the goal is allegedly to detain and deport, then why are we creating space, long-term space here? I read a report today from MLive saying that there's going to be a new detention center coming to Highland Park.
Well, I don't think that the city of Highland Park wants that, and I know that the government in Highland Park has spoken out against it. Now, can they stop that process from happening? That remains to be seen. But you're talking about, if you're talking about preemption or you're talking about a higher authority, there's really no higher authority than the federal government in our country. But again, cities have rights, citizens have rights, and it's unfortunate that a lot of these rights are just being trampled. But yeah,
So,
that is accurate. They are intending to build, and that was proliferated through the media several weeks ago, and I know that Highland Park leadership has responded against it.
well, and you brought up that cities still have rights and individual states still have rights, and I know the federal government, no pun intended, trumps it. But we've heard leaders from different law enforcement groups from all over the country saying they plan to stand up against ICE and continue to follow the Constitution that we have in place. Now,
Right.
what authority do local police departments and sheriff departments have when it comes to ICE? Do they have any jurisdiction over them at all, or do they simply have to comply?
Well, they're not being ordered to comply. They're ordered, they're not to obstruct them enforcing a federal law. But when we talk about this, and you mentioned the states have rights, and I don't think I said that, but you did, and it struck in my mind something that's really interesting is that I would bet dollars to donuts. Most of the people who are really on the conservative agenda have been more so on the states' rights issues. And now we have the federal government looming, the same way that the federal government came in to enforce and impose civil rights, and from the 50s and 60s and all, and since have tried to dismantle it. They're using that same mechanism of federal authority through ICE. And
I
it's
thought of
just so,
that today,
I didn't really even think about that until you said it. It's so ironic that
right?
that is taking place. And it's something, you are making news right now. This is
I thought of
you
that
really are.
today.
I really I couldn't. I mean, wow. I'm kind of outdone just thinking about it. And those people who are champions of states' rights, I imagine a lot of them are on support in support of this agenda with ICE.
Well, what is interesting too, and it's so hypocritical, is that you would think conservative followers, you know, traditionally have not wanted Big Brother. They felt
Hmm.
that the
Right,
Democrats it's too much government. But
right.
what are we experiencing right now? Too
Well,
much government.
no, 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 no.
Not
The
too
use of
much.
gun. No,
And
here's what it
over,
is. I agree with everything you said. I was just making a point to be kind of like the counterpoint, or But what I think what we're seeing here is this fear of there's the hatred that's underlying all this. No one's talking about it. No one said this is about this, but there's the bias, there's the prejudice, there's the hatred that is imbued in this, and it's almost like it's not spoken, but it's understood. And that is, it's the fear that some people in this country have, that immigrants, and we're a country that was built on immigrants. It was, what did we say? Statue of Liberty, bring me your tired, huddled masses. And
Mhm.
now that's not the case anymore. We don't, we want to become isolationists. We want to become, homogenous. We want, essentially, in many people's minds, a white infrastructure. Here's the problem that I do have, is that there are a lot of people who are against this, but they're afraid of the charisma, and the as many people would say, the young folks say, the swag
Mhm.
of our president. And it's had other people who have stood down. Always be where I'm at with him, and know my place with him, and be able to operate in that particular fashion, using the law, because really the law and the courts of law is really where I think the battlefield is meant to be fought at this point, because this feckless congressional, House and Senate, there's so many Republicans and even some Democrats who have lost a lot of respect for, because of the fact that they won't stand up to this, because it only happens because no one else is saying anything.
Campaigning is about to begin for the midterms.
Right.
And it's never been more important than it has now. And typically, voter turnout is pretty low when it comes to midterms, but there are more than 400 seats that are going to come open in this country. And we have a lot of people in many of our districts here in Metro Detroit who will be running, either to take a seat back from the Republican side or to run for the first time, or you have multiple Democrats per seats. But let's talk about the impact that has from home, and when it comes federally, and why we really, even though we've got all of this noise happening with ICE, we can't lose sight of the eyes on the prize, which is the midterms.
You make a great point. And we have really essentially turned this into our political podcast hour.
Whoops.
Because you can't escape that. And when we're talking about the regular days of affairs, the regular, everyday life, politics is all important these days. Almost every story that we see, there's something that ICE. This is very political, controversial. But let me say this to my Democratic brethren and sisters: y'all need to get it together and understand that you are a coalition, that you need to, find out what's your plan, put a playbook together and execute it. Understanding the reality is, if you look at the statistics, we have the numbers. We have the numbers. We outnumber Republicans. And right now there's a lot of negativity in polling towards the Republican Party because of what our president is doing. And we need to use that to our advantage. But oftentimes, we got it loaded up, and the cards are set in our favor, and we fail to execute. We fail to execute. And the Republicans, they, as much as I may say that I've lost some respect for a lot of them, but they're executing. If you just look at what they're doing, They are executing their plan. As draconian as one might think it is, and as anti-people that one may see it, and really not something for Perkins for the people, but they're executing, and they're only executing because they stick together. Like my mom told us, I got five brothers. She says, "Y'all better not never lose a fight." She says, "Because if one of you come home bloody, you all come home bloody." And that's what the Democrats need to do. And I hope that they can get together. I look at what has happened locally here, and some of the back channeling that happens within the party, and how, right now in the city of Detroit, I think it happened in 2022, if I'm not mistaken. That was the first time in almost 60 years that we didn't have Black representation in Congress for the city of Detroit. And I understand they did redistricting and things like that, but that's of no moment. We are a Black city predominantly, and for that to happen, that was uh, some people failed to execute the plan, failed to work together.
Hmm.
You
And I
know,
bring this up too because Detroit is one of the blackest cities in America. And you have President Trump, actually, scratch that, JD Vance, who was like, hey, you want me to bring in the National Guard? There's thought that they want us hostile. And when I say us, it's us collectively. But they want everybody to be hostile so they can come in and make a big grandstand be right before the midterms to say, see, I told you Detroit is violent, especially when it comes to protests and demonstrations and whatnot. So it's interesting because that's where I'm like, we all have to do our civic duty and get involved. We need to
right.
do it peacefully. We need to understand what we need to say and what we shouldn't say to ICE officers, and because we don't want these escalations to be distractions.
It's interesting when you talk about protests, and we have to continue, civil disobedience. We have to make sure, because we have to be safe. We can't match guns with them, nor do you want to,
Hmm.
because we want everyone to go out and protest and go home safely too. We want their mark to be met. We want the consciousness of Americans to be raised and to understand what's going on here. If you can't describe it any other way, like some political scientists, how they may describe it, or some sociologists, or even a psychologist, you could just say this is just wrong. It's just wrong. And you want to bring that into everyone's living room. You want to bring that into everyone's conversation. When you do that, and you do that in a way that, with an element of class, an element of fearlessness, an element of etiquette, and not to, not to mean that, doesn't mean that you can't get a little grimy and a little dirty, but to have all those things together and create that beautiful soup is what you want to do. And what they're doing is, I was having breakfast with some friends of mine, lifelong friends of mine, last week, and one my friend's sister, and she's white. Let's just call her Mary H. Okay, and Mary H is full of fire, and she was, I was really, she brought me to shame. I'm eating my nice breakfast in this opulent restaurant, and we're sitting there talking, just catching up, New Year's, that you want to get with friends and things like that. And I've known Mary just just a little bit, because her brother, and her nephew, who I know very well. She came in, and she was going to, this is last Saturday, she's going to protest down at Hart Plaza. And she was talking about, people were saying you shouldn't be protesting. And that's what's been created in here. And the fear associated with protesting, and maybe harm coming directly to you from these agents. And Mary, with her, I want to say 60 plus, maybe close to 70-year-old self, she was fearless, fearless. And, she actually, she was talking so loud that some other people at the other table, they were like, go on, sister, and she was going at, and, my commitment to her is, you tell me the next time you're protesting, I'm coming with you. I'll drop what I got to do, and let's go ahead and do it together, arm in arm, hand in hand. But you have to do these things, and the
Hmm.
protests need to continue. We need to continue to collaborate, not only just with party affiliation, but also all of the inner workings within our society. The unions need to step up because this is really an attack on unions. There's so many tangentially related wars going on, that we need to see that. And, we need to counteract the things. Look, Project 2025, it's almost done
Right?
because they had a playbook and they came in and they've executed it from every branch of government. It almost seems like he's got he's got a direct line into the Supreme Court, which is something you've never seen in the history of, definitely in my life. And as
Hmm.
I've studied many, many, many thousands of Supreme Court cases, what's happened in the past 3, 4, or 5 years is it's hopefully it's an anomaly. Hopefully it's something that we won't see again. But I'm not too sure.
Hopefully we have, some leadership that steps up and then they make themselves a playbook, because it sounds like, honestly, the Trump administration did a very smart job by manifesting what they wanted to do. Manifestation comes after you've thought about what you want it to look like, you've smelled like what it smells like, you've seen
Mhm.
it, you've
Mhm.
plotted it out, and you put the steps ahead of you, and they did that. And I will say, like, it's terrible. I don't love I truly hate the way our country is going, but they laid out the plan. They strategized.
Yeah. Yeah.
um
Sure.
it's wild. I did see some crazy comments today, though. The Detroit News was showing video of the protest, and almost like 99% of the comments. Now, mind you, these are people who are trolling and just keyboard jockeys, but they're like, oh, these people are paid agitators. They're being paid to
No, they're
protest.
not.
They're
They're not.
1099. Talk about, because you and I were down at the No Kings protest this summer
Several times.
several times. Tell me, because I know who these people are. You tell me the types of people who were down at that protest, the one
I
at the
mean,
train station.
it's every aspect of our lives who's down there with the men, women, and children. They're bringing, a lot of families are bringing their children because they're being, they want them to understand this is a historic moment. Because people let's understand why we call it the No Kings protest, because we understand what the goal of this individual is. He's already told us that once you vote for me, you won't have to vote again. He has said this. And so, that's where we start with the creation of the idea of the No Kings protest because, yeah, we have a big election this year. It's huge. It will impact how you can nullify some of the decisions that are being made if you have control of the House. If you just get the House, then it stops a lot of the nonsense that's going on. But, in 2 more years after that, he's trying to figure out a way that he can stay, and I think that's underlying a lot of this agenda without them even saying it. But they're saying it in the No Kings protest. They've already told you what it is. So,
Hmm.
it's baffling. But again, it's meant to instill fear, and you have to be fearless. But we also have to work with the Republicans too, in that we got to pull them out of, if this is not who you are and you believe in some of the core ideas that led you into office, even though you may have come in the wrong party, I tell some of my Republican friends that, you've come in, but stay true to what your principles are. Because if you stay true to those principles, not allowing someone else to malign them, not allowing someone else to scare you into going along with them and laughing as they laugh and doing whatever they do and following your own path, we'll find, collaboration and an ability to, lock arms on particular projects, agendas, laws, and stopping laws that are meant to hurt or have the resulting effect of hurting our people.
Right.
So
Well,
it's we have to do that. I mean, we have to get our own game together first, but as we do, people will respect that, and people will see, oh, okay, they got their shit together.
right.
And they'll come on board.
Yeah. Well, and it's circling back to because we talked about the fear that we're feeling with this administration, and rightly so, because I want to talk about Renee Good
Oh
and,
boy.
this 37-year-old woman who was shot in the face, allegedly murdered by an ICE agent about a
Mhm.
week ago. And, JD Vance has come out already and said that the officer has immunity and will not be charged. And now, the Minneapolis, the mayor has saying they're going to launch an investigation. The family is going to file a civil lawsuit. And in the
Right.
meantime, we've had a slew of Department of Justice prosecutors step down because they feel like their hands are tied in this case. So, where do we feel like, as an attorney, what happens now, especially when your federal government says there's immunity or there's nothing you can do, but break it down for us too, because this is a really complicated case.
It is. It is. So let me be a lawyer for the agent that did the shooting. Let me be the lawyer for him. We've seen cases, and we've seen a lot of cases, even in our city, in our fair city, in the city of Detroit, of how hard it would be to convict a law enforcement officer. There is a certain code of honor that jurors afford law enforcement officers that they don't afford normal citizens. It's just a fact. I'm telling you the facts. Not I don't care what people are saying. I'm telling you what actually happens. I'm telling you the cases in which the officers who are found not guilty, and arguably they did everything they said that they did, and juries will turn a blind eye or so. But even before that, we do have a vehicle that is headed in his direction. I don't know what his injuries were, if he had any, if he had any scrapes or bruises, but and this is all on camera. It's for everybody's consumption to watch and to see this very sad moment, not only in Miss Good's life, but her family. Let's not escape and let's not overlook that, and always be sending out prayers to them, but also to the movement. Another element of fear. There it is, another that for all to see. Almost just like when they used to they took the individual in the middle of the town square. They took that black slave in the middle of the town square and they beat him to show all the others what's in there for you if you fall out of line. But criminally speaking, they've already made the decision that he wouldn't be charged. Now, the state government still has the ability to do their own investigation and to perform whatever investigation, notwithstanding what the federal government says, even if it's something that will never come to a courtroom, with criminal charges for that individual. It does have, and it's not just ceremony. It does have some could have some positive effect from this very horrific situation. Now, I do believe, and as much as people would argue that he didn't commit a crime, I mean, they can argue that. I would argue not so much that he didn't commit a crime. I would argue that it's unlikely that he would be convicted of an allegation that he committed a crime. It's a distinction with a very huge difference. So that's what I would argue. But what I do believe is that he can be sued. I do believe that a court of law, based upon what I saw, but there's a lot of things. There's a lot of information that's going to come from being in that moment and being in that scene. Whatever conversation that took place beforehand and all those things that led up to Miss Good's death. But I still see a massive civil lawsuit against the federal government. And, maybe this is the first of many things that are going to lead to the dismantling of this riotous affair.
Yeah.
So a variety of different um, events going on, hopefully, which would lead to this dismantling. I disagree with it. I think it's wrong. I think it's illegal. I think it's constitutionally violative of people's rights. Um, but I'm one opinion, but I don't think I'm different from a lot of people.
No, and I watched that video. When I watched the video, I hadn't seen it yet. I feel like now that I've left TV news, I feel a little bit more sheltered from it, where I can pick and choose when it's time. When it's time, and my husband showed me the video, and I immediately started crying because I've seen a lot of horrible things,
Mhm.
as a journalist and even as a photographer out on the scene. I've never seen anything like that,
Yeah.
where you saw it all go down, and I'm like, there's no way. And now again, this is just in my civilian opinion, that a police officer, I've watched so many police chases on foot, helicopter, whatever. I've never seen a police officer just shoot somebody like that. It
Let me
was
say this. Let me say this. As a defense attorney, and I do a lot of civil rights work, and I do a lot of civil lawsuits, but I built my career on mostly on a lot of criminal work, and I still love to do the work. And and I attack. I literally in that courtroom, I go and attack these officers, Detroit police officers, but I've never seen anyone's finer. I could never see, these officers. They have hearts, they have families, they have compassion, and they love their job. Many of them love their job, and some of them have made mistakes, and I'm there to expose the mistakes, but not something like this. What it looks like, as I see the video, and again, I wasn't there. And as a lawyer, I try to keep this open mind. And I know a lot of people say, "See, he's agreeing with him." And no, 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 no. I'm not doing that. But what I am is trying to keep an open mind. But in my open mind, why not just step to the side and just get her plate, and then and have somebody take her down in a couple of blocks from now.
or
You
shoot
got
the
all these,
tire.
huh?
Shoot the tire out.
You could shoot the tire. I mean, you
Right.
don't even have to do that. Just stop her.
Right.
Have a vehicle stop her at a checkpoint and then arrest her. For
It looked to
and
me,
then you can arrest her for attacking an officer. Because if he firmly believes that she, and it can avoid a death. I mean, he's in a situation where, and I understand, technically, he does not have to move. And, he's telling this woman to stop. I get that. But I'm talking about human beings. I'm talking about that wasn't going to stop you from living. This guy seemed to be physically fit. He's, not like some of the ICE agents I've seen, out there, but, you know, the ability to move out of the way and then take other steps to take her down or get her arrested and detain her from that point. But it was so unavoidable.
well, and two, like, and what are your thoughts? I mean, especially you've reviewed hours upon hours of body cam footage of, evidence in courts. Um, it almost looks like a lack of training as well, right? I mean, fight or flight happens, but officers go through an extensive amount of training to make sure that they are protecting lives.
Right. I don't know. what the training is for ICE agents. I don't know who these individuals are. We don't know who they are because they run around with masks. They run around faces covered, and you don't you cannot you can hardly see the whites of their eyes, and that is also another I believe it's a tactic to instill fear. But again, as far as any training, I don't know who these individuals are. I don't know what the requirements for them are, but as far as some being physically capable of performing the duties, I don't see that. Especially when you've got the Secretary of War who wants generals and officers who are not physically fit to retire. I see a lot of these ICE agents who might be on a job a couple of weeks need to retire now if you apply that same standard. So, um,
It's
you know,
certainly not the associate's degree in criminal justice and the police academy that's required to be one of our fine Detroit police officers,
right. Exactly. Exactly. I
right?
mean, these, like I said, I mean, we disagree all the time, but we don't disagree too much on empathy and caring and concern. You see it too much.
Mhm.
I see it. Even the ones who probably are mad at me. That's all right. But
That's all right.
you know,
Let's
it just
talk
means I was
about,
doing my job.
right? Let's talk about something a little bit more salacious. Let's talk
Oh boy.
about President Trump's visit to the Ford Rouge plant and
Oh
him
yeah.
getting called a pedophile protector by the worker. And now it's gone viral. President
Hmm.
Trump, mouthed fuck you and gave him the finger. We're hearing that, the UAW is going to do what it can to protect this worker.
Right.
He's got freedom of speech. But where
Right.
does freedom of speech come into play when you are on the job?
Well, you'd have to look at your code of conduct. You'd have to look at your rules. In this situation, he did something that was embarrassing to the Ford company and the Ford brand. But the president did something embarrassing to the office of the president of the United States. What president has said "fuck you"? I, no
Right.
words. You see, I mean, no words. I mean, I'm not a fan necessarily. I could never see Ronald Reagan. The worst he did one time is, my mom used to talk about it. He says, he told that person to shut up. That was the worst. I couldn't see a Bush, either one of them, a Jimmy Carter, a Nixon. It just wasn't something that happens. This is we are in new times.
As we wrap this up, we know we've got to do our civic duty and do all the things, but we want to be protected when we're out in the streets. If somebody approaches our home, regardless, what do people need to say to protect themselves again, when they're approached and if they're approached?
Well, here, one, they can remain silent. You understand that their silence might cause them to be detained, but they can remain silent. Two, don't lie about your status. Just say nothing, but don't lie about it because that can be another element that can be used against you. You don't have to sign anything. You understand? Again, stay calm. As difficult as that may sound, and there, a lot of people say, "Hey, Perkins, is easy for you to say that sitting up in that ivory tower, and not having it have had that experience." But I promise you, stay calm. You have a right to a lawyer. Lawyers will be appointed for you in these situations for those individuals who are detained and those individuals who are detained and who are not documented or who are not here legally. So you have some rights. You just don't have the same standing and the same rights that an individual citizen would have to contest the arrest or the detention. Because here's arguably, I was talking to another lawyer, one of my mentor. I like to talk about Gerald Evelyn, who's my mentor in a lot of ways. But great lawyer. And we were talking about doing this show. And, he says, the irony of it is that you being detained and someone fabricating reasonable suspicion to engage you in a conversation and demand your documents. And if you're not a citizen or if you're not an individual who's here legally, you get detained and you ultimately be set in the process of deportation proceedings, right? Now, legally, you could go ahead and let's say, for instance, during that process of that detention, that unlawful detention, they found some contraband, a firearm, or some drugs. You arguably could win that case criminally, right? But of what moment is it if they're going to deport you? You understand?
Right.
So it's two different, it runs on two different avenues. And when you don't have the standing to contest what they're doing because you're not a citizen or an individual who's documented or an individual who has, who is a lawful alien who's residing in the United States or present in the United States, then, it's a twisted way. But don't, I wouldn't lie. Stay calm. You might want to inquire why you're asking, or why are you asking? Why am I being detained? And as I tell a lot of my clients, never make any admissions. You ask, why am I being detained? Is this a criminal investigation? And I want to see my lawyer. And from that point, those are the things when someone comes to your home. Do you have a warrant to come in my home? You want to have all of those things at play. And all those things in the presence of your mind, and practice that. Practice that with your children. Practice that with your friends so that, it becomes fluid, because a lot of times just knowing it and reading it one time, in that moment of fear, anxiousness, knowing trouble is lurking right in your face, you can forget if you haven't,
Right.
you know?
Am I being detained? Am I free to leave?
Yes,
I do not consent. I'm
yes,
exercising my right to remain silent. I
yes,
want a lawyer. Please show me a judge signed warrant.
yeah,
So, and talking too much makes you look guilty.
yeah,
Don't consent to any searches unless they have a warrant, right? And
yes,
absolutely do not physically interfere.
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
don't
what,
physically interfere. You're right.
and then, thankfully, we've seen a lot of camera footage from everybody's smartphones. Are we allowed to record these interactions?
Why not?
Okay.
Why
Thank you.
not? I mean, as long as that person is not, what they'll say is that you're too close and you're making me unsafe. That officer can say that, and now you're affecting my ability to perform my job. You see how you can do that? So you want to keep a clear distance so they can't reasonably say that, and keep the camera rolling. Oh, we forgot to expressly say this. Am I being detained or am I free to go? I think that's where it starts. So we're a state that you don't have to produce any identification necessarily, but what can happen and how they can use this process in order to circumvent your rights.
Right. And we've seen it's very abrasive. They're
Oh,
very abrasive in their approach. It immediately sets off your fight or flight, right? You feel triggered. So remain calm, take a deep breath. Am I being detained or am I free to go? I want a lawyer, where's your
yeah,
warrant, etc.
yeah,
That's real good.
yeah. Well,
Anything to
I
touch
am I
on?
am running I'm running out of juice, and I don't want us to get cut off. And we've been going at it for a minute, and hopefully, I think that if people can take what we've talked about, our back and forth and our conversation, and use it to educate themselves and their friends, and share this. And this is what we are. We are Perkins for the people, and this is for the people, and this is about the people, and we want it to be shared with the people. And it's saying again, send us your comments, send us your requests, guests that you might want to see, and information that you might want to be brought to your living room and to your laptops. I am Todd Russell Perkins. I'm an attorney at law. I'm an activist. I'm a person who loves my community, and I'm a person that loves you all. So I'm thank Connie for taking time out of her night to not only produce the show, but also be a co-host tonight. So she's usually behind the camera, and I am so indebted to her and her team. But thank you so much tonight.
My pleasure, always.
Yeah. All right. Peace out.
Peace.